I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for the City of Springdale for March 19, 2025. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and please remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we begin this council meeting on the last day of winter, let us take a moment to acknowledge the changing season and give thanks for the coming warmer, longer, and brighter days ahead. Spring is a time for new beginnings, and with the start of the new season, let us incline our ears toward reason, apply our hearts to understanding, and seek knowledge we can use to find common ground among the residents for the betterment of our entire community. Thank you. Ms. Browder, if you take roll.
Mr. Cleaves?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Ms. McFarland? Mrs. Solomyska? Mr. Vanover?
Present.
Ms. Webster?
Present.
Ms. Grant?
Present. Ms. McFarland had previously notified council that they would not be attending tonight, and Ms. Sullivan Weisskopf is under the weather, and we wish her a speedy recovery. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun right now. All right, next up, we have the minutes. Next on the agenda is the minutes. And council, in your packets, you had the minutes for the March 5th, 2025 meeting. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt. Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved with 5 affirmative votes. All right, before we move on to committee and official reports, we did have a request from administration to add an executive session this evening related to pending legal matter. So at this point, the chair is open to a motion to amend our agenda to add an executive session.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion about adding the agenda item? Seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council on the agenda change.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Cleaves?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. The agenda change has been approved with 5 affirmative votes. We will go ahead and insert that after ordinances and resolutions, so a 9A or 9B, and that's when we will have that executive session, or at least an opportunity to have one. All right, with the administration out of the way, next we'll move on to committee and official reports. First up tonight is Civil Service Commission. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, members of council as well. The Springdale Civil Service Commission did meet on March the 6th, and the meeting was called to order at approximately 2 o'clock. Members of the commission in attendance was myself, Mrs. Cheryl Darby, and Mrs. Kathy McNair. Also present was Assistant City Administrator, Ms. Morgan, as well as the Human Resource Administrator, Mrs. Edwards. Following a disposition of the minutes, which were approved 3-0 with a motion made by Ms. McNair and seconded by Mrs. Darby. Following the disposition of the minutes, there were a couple of reports. The park maintenance supervisor hiring process was the initial part of the reports, and having filled that position with Mr. Scott Yelton which was a internal promotion, thereby leaving a vacancy in the position that he was promoted from. So given that information, a hiring timeline was presented in order to fill the position that was vacated from the promotion. And following a discussion about the hiring timeline, a motion to fill this position from the current parks maintenance resulted in the approval of the hiring timeline, and the motion was made by Mrs. McNair and seconded by Mrs. Darby. So that motion passed 3-0 with my approval as well. And that basically concluded the activity as far as the reports and the new business. Okay. Any questions?
Don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, Rules and Law, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Vanover.
No report.
Planning Commission. Now, Planning Commission, both Ms. Sullivan, Weisskopf, and McFarland are absent, and I don't believe sent in an early report, so we'll have to circle back with them for our next meeting. All right, next we'll go to Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Board of Health, I believe Ms. McFarland did share an update with Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll share the notes she sent me from the Board of Health meeting from March 13th. Dr. Webb has retired from his practice and will be retiring from the Board of Health. Dr. Ridgway with the practice will be taking over after he retires from the board. There was a food program update. Mi Cozumel has a remodel in progress, and as people probably noticed, Wawa construction is continuing. eClinical Works was launched on March the 3rd. Their staff received 2 days of training. The educators, I apologize, the educators were here for 2 additional days to help work through issues. There was an update on grant summary, remaining balances. The Workforce Development Grant currently is at $279,000. The Enhanced Operation Grant is just over $166,000. A REACH grant is at $63,000. A program known as the Healthy Mom Baby Van will be coming back into the community. They will be here once a month through the end of the year. We'll be putting more focus on Healthy Mom Baby meeting once a month. I do not have a location for that, but we can find that out maybe with some clarification at our next meeting. And that really summarizes most of the notes I received. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that update. All right, next up we have OKI, and that's with me. Council, as you recall, in our last month update, I shared that OKI had been working through the implications of what some of the executive orders at the federal level have done, and then as that trickles down to state and local level, how that affects the way that OKI does its business. I did want to share 2 things. One, OKI did update what was the Environmental Justice Committee, since that is not the process that's permitted for federal work. It is now going to be known as the Community Assessment Committee, and we did have to remove the minority impact focus as a result. Based on the assessment, going through the rules and bylaws for that part of the scoring, OKI still believes that 80 to 85% of communities that were previously receiving favorable scoring will still be maintained, which is some good news for Springdale, as we've benefited from that scoring as well, just based on our diversity and the demographics of our community. Some grants have been restarted that were paused while the new rules are being assessed, which is also good news. The other thing that happened at OKI in the last meeting on 3/13 was an update on AAM, which is Advanced Air Mobility. There's 2 types of those. This is drones and also bigger drones that are known as eVTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing devices. Why this came up inside of OKI is that OKI is now developing an infrastructure plan on how to support the increasing use of AAM devices. So a lot of things that are happening now in terms of surveys and impact assessments are done with drones or these eVTOLs devices. But how those get supported in terms of airports and airspace is still very much a fluid thing. We may, in fact, be the first in the nation to develop a plan, which I think is interesting. So that is ongoing. The only other update from OKI is that we did update the TIP. This is where we actually list the projects that result in money coming to local communities. Every 2 years, it gets rolled into the statewide TIP, and that process is happening right now. The comment period for the updated TIP funding plan started on 3/10 and is scheduled for a 4/10 meeting. Reviews and approvals will go from there through the end of July, and then it'll get rolled into next fiscal year's state budget. So that process is ongoing. There's about $4.8 billion at federal, state, and county level that we're talking about. So this is real money, and this has helped Springdale on a number of projects, so it's something worth keeping an eye on. We're talking about real money. As you may recall, the Northland Boulevard project, there's somewhere in the area of $5 million that supplemented Springdale's projects. A lot of that has come through the OKI funding mechanisms. So that's it for the OKI update, unless there's any questions. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, just a reminder, the State of the City address will be next Wednesday, March the 26th at 7 p.m. at the Rec Center. Encourage folks to come out, see what's going on in 2025, as well as get the opportunity to hear from all of our department heads and directors, and to have the opportunity to actually speak with them freely afterwards once the presentation is complete. Second thing I want to address, our last meeting and really several meetings before that even. But we had a lot of feedback from our residents in Heritage Hill regarding traffic, parking, and the like. And so wanted to make sure our residents as well as council is aware. Our police department has been doing an outstanding job, as I feel they always have been. And that segment of our community has gotten a lot of attention probably over the last 36 months with regard to the situation with the individual with the nails. Very focused, detailed patrolling going on, officers going really above and beyond, been out there at night with metal detectors trying to find nails through the course of that. And then obviously once that was addressed and wrapped up, they've been trying to address the quality of life, parking, and traffic issues there. And so with that, we want to make sure everybody's clear, and I've said this before, even going back into the fall, there's strict enforcement in Heritage Hill with regard to parking and traffic. And so the time of warnings was probably a year or so ago with our community notations, and that's over. So as a result of that, just an example, just this past weekend, there were approximately 40 citations that were given out. And I got my first call with regard to a complaint this morning. It wasn't even 8:30 yet, didn't have my tie on yet, but I was awake and dressed. And folks should know there's not going to be a warning. If you are in violation, you're going to be cited to court, and you can address that matter there in court. But this is what strict enforcement looks like, and we want everybody to know that that's going on. So if someone is confused or didn't know, that's what's going on. And the idea is to change the behavior with regard to how folks are driving and parking so that everybody has a high quality of life over there. One of the main ways to change behavior is to have some negative consequences. So I want everyone to be aware of that. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mayor Hawkins. Don't see any questions. Next, we'll move on to the administrator's report. Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kind of on the heels of that, I would let council know that notices did go out this week to the affected residents on Ledro and Castro regarding the new no parking zones that will be established. They're currently staked with wooden stakes and some fluorescent ribbing around those just to indicate where those zones will be. We also marked several no parking here to corner sections that we heard from the residents as well coming in off of Chesterdale on both Tivoli and Benedier. So those notices will be going up here shortly as well. Speaking with Mr. Miller from Public Works, it looks like the scope of the work should be wrapped up hopefully early April, weather permitting. But he did inform me that the signage did come in and we were able to do utility locations. So a lot of those upfront hurdles have already been taken care of. So that should be moving forward here sooner than later. And I do believe Ms. Morgan has a few things.
Yes, thank you. A couple items to share this evening. So our tax department has recently implemented a couple of new features to assist taxpayers in filing and paying their taxes. The first is going to be a secure email site for communicating with our tax staff. Taxpayers are able to securely transmit their documents and other sensitive information directly with staff through this secure portal. Additionally, the second option is going to be the ability to make payments online. The online payment portal is available to individual taxpayers only at this point in time. However, there's a registration process that must be completed prior to having the ability to make that payment, and payments are accepted via bank account or checking credit debit card with a 3% convenience fee associated with that. So both of those services, you're able to access those via the tax department page of Springdale's new website, springdaleohio.gov. That's the tax department page, and there's links for both of those services. Additionally, I wanted to share the city is transitioning to a new payroll provider. It's called Paylocity. As a result of that, all of our staff, including our elected officials and our boards and commission members, will need to register for an account with Paylocity in order to be able to access your pay stubs, your W-2s, update any of your demographic information, direct deposits, tax withholding information, et cetera. So be on the lookout for an email tomorrow with further details on how to complete that step. And that's all for me.
All All right, I have a couple questions. Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. At our last meeting, we talked about, as we move towards the parking approach as an initial phase here, the number 20 was thrown around, and I'm not sure that was really accurate at the time, not in any kind of lack of transparency way. Would you say the number is closer to 30?
I believe the number is going to be closer to 30.
Okay.
I believe what TEC had originally drafted for us when they were evaluating parking spaces on Ledro was going to take approximately 20 spaces. When you take that same bend and curve on the southern side of Ledro and apply that to Castro on how that curve is, I think there was going to be an additional 8 to 10 spots that would be potentially impacted over on Castro as well. So combination thereof, we're probably looking around 28-ish, give or take.
Thank you. And that, again, I was using the number 20, and I just wanted to be clear that was kind of an estimate at the time and that it might be higher. So thank you very much.
Mr. Vanover?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to report to the administration that the gas lines are marked over there. So I guess we're waiting on Cincinnati Water Works to do their wonder. But I appreciate the unrolling of this and anticipate feedback.
And as we said in the meetings, feedback is available and welcome, and if we need to make adjustments, we can. Maybe when the reality of those spots hits, we might take a different approach, but if people do have questions about that, definitely reach out. Mr. Ewell?
Yep. Thank you. Just one last thing. I do know the letters had indicated to contact Public Works. Mr. Miller is in the best position to kind of address where some of those no parking zones are going to go. So if residents do have comments, questions, or concerns about those, he'd be willing to go out to talk about why those are positioned where they are. And as of now, that's a pretty good estimate on where those signs will be posted, but there is a little bit of flexibility. We're trying to line them up with like property lines and driveway aprons so that they kind of made sense so that we could do our best to maximize the parking spaces still available.
All right, thanks for that. Mr. Gleaves?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for, I would say, Ms. Morgan. Get some clarity on the website. The .gov is still in process for all of us. The old site, you cannot get through. It doesn't direct you to the new site. I don't know if there's an issue there, or I don't even think a lot of the residents know that we're going to the .gov. So if they're going to do their taxes, they're not going to be able to access that as of now unless they know the actual domain. Am I correct?
So the redirect. Mr. Ewell?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, just a real quick on that specifically, there is a security feature that is currently inhibiting that direct feed over to the ohio.gov email or website rather. We are working through that right now to try and get something in place to do the redirect. What I did find is clearing your cache in your computer will get rid of that error message and will push you over, so it's an automatic redirect. But we're trying to get that set up for people who don't or unaware how to clear that cache. So nonetheless, we're trying to work through that here in the next couple of days to hopefully provide a smoother transition for anybody looking to pay those taxes and whatnot.
Thank you.
I know the team at the tax department welcomes walk-ins anytime, so they've always been very friendly when I've come in. So if you can't get through on the website, feel free to stop in or call administration. We can take care of you. All right. Next, we'll move on to the Law Director's report. Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report tonight.
All right. Next, the Engineer's report. Mr. Riggs.
Thank you. We got a few items here. We have the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project. The contractor's looking to begin or resume work later this month. The Tri-County Parkway Sidewalk Extension project it's been completed, but they're going to be addressing punch list items and doing final restoration here soon, likely to be completed next month. The East Kemper Phase 1 improvements, that's the sort of funded project. Our survey is complete, where we should have the base mapping done by the end of this week. Then in late April, we're hoping to have a preliminary plan review meeting with Public Works. Then the Northland Kemper intersection realignment, that's the proposal's up for a second reading this evening. That's all I had.
All right. And did you, I believe in your report you said that the work on Northland we expect still to resume here later this month, or is that still TBD?
Yeah,
Still
that's the plan.
Great. They were making such good progress up until the weather turned.
Yeah.
I know I've gotten a number of questions about that. All right, next up I'm sorry, Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to add on to your question, I did speak with Mr. Miller about that the other day. He was in contact with the contractor, and those folks said that the work crews were due in at the end of the month to resume work. So that should be happening sometime late next week or sooner.
I imagine we'll get another snowfall here late March then.
As soon as they come back, we'll be, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
We'll plan on it. All right, next up, Rental Program Committee, Mr. Vanover.
No report.
All right, Urban Farming Special Committee, Mr. Jacobs, did you have an update for that?
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right, that's the end of committees and official reports. Next, we'll move on to communications. Ms. Browder, are there any communications for council this evening? All right, next up on the agenda is communications from the audience. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience that would like to address council for any reason. You simply need to come forward to the podium, state your name and address, sign in, and you'd have up to 5 minutes to speak to council on any item that you would like. At this point, the floor is open for communications from the audience.
Hello, my name's Julie Tudor, and I have a couple things this evening. The first one is about our Springdale Offering Support Scholarship. This year we have the opportunity for 2 scholarships, one in the amount of $3,000 and one in the amount of $2,000. These are available to Springdale seniors who are planning to go to a trade school or a college, either one. All they need to do is just go to the city website, find Springdale Offering Support, and there is a link there they can click on and complete the application. If they're having issues with the website or the link, they can reach out to me. My phone number is 513-505-5707. So we look forward to receiving those. The deadline is March 31st, though. The other item I wanted to address is just a comment, observation about the way the last couple of public hearings have been held. It just seems that they're done in reverse order. You have the public hearing, and then you've been reading the legislation after the public hearing. And I've sat here through all of them, and I've heard people in the audience even say, well, we don't know what, for instance, Tri-County Mall is proposing. They just jumped right into the public hearing. So I just think it used to always be that we would have the legislation read, excuse me, and then the public hearing. I just think it would be a little bit less confusing to the public in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tudor. And I will say that in regards to the scholarship, I did see notices from Princeton School District that was also advertising it, and I certainly appreciate the fact that it's tied into them. It gets more visibility to SOS, which is a good thing. All right, the floor is still open for communications. If anyone else would like to address council for any reason. Second call. Third and final call. All right, at this point, I'm closing communications in the audience, and we'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. Next up, or first up, is ordinance number 11-2025. This is a second reading. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance 11-2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Verdantis for preliminary design engineering for the Northland Boulevard and Kemper Road intersection modifications and shared youth path project. Whereas the city of Springdale, Ohio, the city, is planning a modification project at the intersection of Northland Boulevard and Kemper Road, the project. And whereas the project will also include construction of a shared used path consistent with the city's connectivity plan. And whereas the city has been awarded funding to offset the estimated cost for construction of the project. And whereas the city seeks to enter into an agreement with Verdantis for preliminary design engineering services related to the project. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring, Section 1. That the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with Verdantis for completion of preliminary design engineering for the Northland Boulevard and Kemper Road intersection modifications and shared youth path project for the city of Springdale, the proposal. A copy of the proposal is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay Verdantis an amount not to exceed $157,400 for completion of the Northland Boulevard and Kemper Road intersection modifications and shared youth path project, preliminary design engineering as outlined in the proposal. Section 3, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 11, 2025. It is a second reading and can be acted on tonight. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Council, as we get into deliberations for this, I just want to remind you, as we are missing 2 members tonight, just be aware that an ordinance in the city of Springdale still requires at least 4 council members to approve, not just a simple majority. So it would take 4 votes in the affirmative to pass this evening. Are there any questions or discussion related to ordinance number 11, 2025? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye. Excuse me, aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 11, 2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, next up on the agenda is ordinance number 12, 2025. This is also a second reading. Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 12, 2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Marquee Engineering for design engineering for the Community Center HVAC Replacement Project Phase 2. Whereas the city of Springdale, Ohio, the city, is planning an HVAC replacement project at the Springdale Community Center, the project. And whereas requests for qualifications for design engineering services were received for the project, and whereas the city seeks to enter into an agreement with Marquee Engineering for professional engineering services related to the project. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with Marquee Engineering for completion of designed engineering services for the Community Center HVAC Replacement Project Phase 2, the proposal. A copy of the proposal is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay Marquee Engineering an amount not to exceed $20,200 for completion of the Community Center HVAC Replacement Project, Phase 2 Design Engineering Services as outlined in the proposal. Section 3, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 12, 2025. It is a second reading and can be acted on tonight. What is your pleasure?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council on ordinance 12, 2025.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 12, 2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, next up we have ordinance number 13, 2025. This is also a second reading. Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 13, 2025, an ordinance accepting a proposal under the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Pavement Technology Incorporated for the 2025 annual street program Pavement Rejuvenator Project. Whereas the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program has advertised and received bids for the purchase of machinery, materials, supplies, and other articles and services that participants in the program can utilize. And whereas the city of Springdale, the city wishes to maintain various streets throughout the city through the application of Pavement Rejuvenator, and whereas Pavement Technology Incorporated was the lowest and best bidder through the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the Pavement Rejuvenator project with a proposal amount of $79,429.24. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. The City of Springdale accepts the state's specifications for Pavement Rejuvenator and agrees that Pavement Technology Incorporated is the lowest and best bidder for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the Pavement Rejuvenator project for the city in the amount of $79,429.24, the project. Section 2. The mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with Pavement Technology Incorporated for the labor, equipment, and materials for the project. Section 3. The Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay Pavement Technology Incorporated the sum of $79,429.24 for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the project. Section 4. Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 5. This ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 13, 2025. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Mr. Gleaves?
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked Law Director a question about the letter that goes along with this. It's addressed to Mr. Mike Huxall. He's no longer with the city. Is there any issue with that? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Browder, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 13, 2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right. Next up, we have ordinance number 14, 2025. This is a second reading. Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 14, 2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with TEC Engineering Incorporated for the provision of professional services for the operations and maintenance of the City of Springdale's traffic control system. Whereas the city desires to enter into an agreement for the provision of professional services for the operations and maintenance of the city's traffic control system, and whereas the city has accepted the proposal submitted by TEC Engineering Incorporated and seeks to enter into an agreement specifying the terms and conditions for the provision of the professional services. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. The mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with TEC Engineering Incorporated for the provision of professional services for the operations and maintenance of the city's traffic control system, the agreement. A copy of the agreement is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2. Consistent with the agreement, the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay TEC Engineering Incorporated a monthly flat fee according to the following schedule. May 1st, 2025 through April 30th, 2026, $4,700 a month. May 1st, 2026 through April 3rd, 2027, $4,700 a month. May 1st, 2027 through April 30th, 2028, $4,700 a month. Section 3, the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is further authorized to pay TEC Engineering Incorporated for all other services performed outside of the agreement pursuant to the terms contained therein. Section 4, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 5, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 14, 2025. It's the second reading. It can be acted on tonight. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? All right, seeing none. Ms. Browder, if you'll poll council.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 14, 2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, next we'll move on to ordinance number 15, 2025. This is just a first reading. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 15, 2025. An ordinance accepting a proposal under the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Strausser Construction Incorporated for the 2025 annual street program, Crack Seal and Cape Seal project. Whereas the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program has advertised and received bids for the purchase of certain machinery, materials, supplies, and other articles and services that participants in the program can utilize. And whereas the City of Springdale, the city, wishes to maintain various streets throughout the city through the application of Crack Seal and Cape Seal, and whereas Strausser Construction Incorporated was the lowest and best bidder through the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the city's Crack Seal and Cape Seal project with a proposal in the amount of $217,833.05. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the City of Springdale accepts the state's specifications for the application of crack seal and cape seal and agrees that Strouser Construction Incorporated is the lowest and best bidder for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the crack seal and cape seal project for the city in the amount of $217,833.05, the project. Section 2, the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with Strouser Construction Incorporated for the labor, equipment, and materials for the project, the agreement. Section 3, the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay Strouser Construction Incorporated the sum of $217,833.05 for the labor, equipment, and materials to complete the project consistent with the agreement. Section 4, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 5, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, this was the first reading of ordinance number 15, 2025. Are there any questions or discussion regarding this ordinance this evening? All right, seeing none, we will see this again at our next meeting. All right, next up on the agenda is ordinance number 16, 2025. This is also a first reading. Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 16, 2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into a mutual aid agreement for law enforcement between the city of Springdale, the city of Forest Park, and the city of Fairfield. Whereas the Ohio Revised Code provides that political subdivisions may enter into contracts for the purpose of obtaining police protection or additional police protection, and for the purpose of obtaining additional police through mutual aid agreements, and whereas the city of Springdale, the city of Forest Park, and the city of Fairfield intend to provide reciprocal police services across jurisdictional lines to enhance the capabilities of law enforcement for the protection of citizens and property throughout their respective municipalities. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. The mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to execute a mutual aid agreement for law enforcement substantially in conformance with the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2. Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the first reading of ordinance number 16, 2025. Are there questions or discussion on this evening? And I'll just confirm, this is a renewal. We have existing agreements in place for all of these communities today. Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. There's an existing mutual aid agreement with all the departments within Hamilton County. When we looked at our agreements with our Butler County neighbors, we realized that we were absent one for Fairfield. So we collaborated with Forest Park to kind of get one together with them.
Mr. Jacobs.
And this agreement would be at least somewhat perpetual until moved against, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the document indicates 60 days notice, anybody can pull out of that agreement. And just like Mr. Yule said, I mean, there's mutual aid. Regardless, this gives a little bit more clarity in terms of what folks can do without stepping on toes of their neighbor.
Great. All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, we will see this again at our next meeting. All right, next up on the agenda is resolution number 8, 2025. Just as a reminder or as a note, I did mention earlier that ordinances require 4 affirmative votes in order to pass. Resolutions only require a simple majority. So just know that as we're going through this resolution, it only requires 3 votes in order to pass. At that point, resolution number 8, 2025. Mr. Jacobs, if you'd read.
Resolution number R8, 2025, a resolution adopting a thoroughfare plan for the city of Springdale. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city seeks to institute a thoroughfare plan which creates and classifies a system of major roadways intended to facilitate travel and preserves the needed right-of-way so that the city can develop appropriate transportation facilities as development occurs or as traffic patterns change. And whereas the city engaged the professional services of Verdontis for the preparation of a thoroughfare plan for the city that would be recommended by Planning Commission and approved by City Council. And whereas a thoroughfare plan has been prepared, presented to, and recommended by Planning Commission and is ready for consideration and final adoption by City Council. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. The Council of the City of Springdale Council does hereby adopt the thoroughfare plan recommended by Planning Commission, a copy of which is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2. Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3. This resolution shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the read-in resolution R8 2025. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I believe we have, in terms of discussion, that we're starting that now. I believe we have a presentation from our city engineer, Mr. Riggs, related to this. Mr. Riggs.
Yeah, thank you. So some of you may have heard this at the Planning Commission meeting. I'll try to be brief as possible. I'll go a little quicker through the slideshow, but if there's any questions, just feel free to stop me. So we'll be running through a few things, basically just describing why we're doing it, what it really means, what the thoroughfare plan means, and then some of the design guidelines and implementation strategies that are outlined in the document. So one of the reasons why we're doing it is because, as you will see, it was originally drafted in 1979, last updated in 1998. So this thing has some age on it. In fact, I got it printed here. It's only about 15 pages and it has hand sketches in it. So it's quite old. So it's just outdated, not just in time, but a lot of the methodology is a little different in this newer version than what we used in the past. So I know it's hard to read, but one of the main outcomes of the original document was this thoroughfare plan. This is a map that shows the functional classifications of the roadway. And each one of those classifications, there was some design requirements associated with each type, like being a thoroughfare, like being an arterial versus collector. All those were identified in this, and they had a limited set of design requirements. So again, it's quite old. One of the things that has changed a lot over the years, and just in my short time here, 5-6 years with the city, the use, the development is, and the culture is changing in Springdale. It's becoming more of a multimodal emphasis placed. I think it's not as auto-centric. I think developers are even wanting to enhance the multimodal connections within the city. So a lot of it is a lot different. And we're building off of what the comp plan update, a couple years back, as well as the connectivity plan update started from. So some of the issues with the city, not a bad thing, but the Springdale network, street network is mostly built out. There's only a handful of spots where there's probably new thoroughfare, new roads that would be developed. And generally speaking, that will probably be private development driven. But it has to be unique for Springdale. It can't be just a one-size-fits-all type of solution. Partly because of the way it is, as I mentioned before, evolving into a multimodal community. So one of the things we're looking to do with the thoroughfare plan is making sure the roads are right sized, the right roads classified in the right way. So we're wanting to take a lot of the burden off some of the smaller side streets and direct them onto the arterials, which that's supposed to happen. That's the purpose of those, to move people and goods and not have limited access, whereas the local roads are more for just that. It's just more accessibility. We're also looking to tie together the previous efforts, the comprehensive plan as well as a bike connectivity plan. Those are two separate documents with two separate purposes, but this document is intended to sort of take parts from both of those and mesh them together to come up with design requirements and a way forward, even with development reviews. So it's a little different approach. I mentioned functional classifications before. We took what they call a context sensitive classification approach. So a functional classification is very important. That's what ODOT uses, and OKI and a lot of funding agencies, they have a certain level of functional classifications that you have to be a collector above to receive federal funding on. ODOT sets those functional classifications. It's very important to have those, but what it doesn't do, it doesn't take into account the surrounding context of that road. For example, Route 4 or 747 or Kemper, you'll almost name any street. One end of the street looks and feels a lot different from the other end. So it may go through, like Kemper, for example, west side Kemper goes through a residential area, but then the whole east side is very commercial. Functionally classified the exact same. So would you really want to have the same design parameters for both roads or both sections of road? So this tries to reflect that context. And as I mentioned before, that's the purpose of the Federal Highway Functional Classification, and ODOT sets those. So there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel with that. The difference a lot between the functional classifications and the contextual classifications, ODOT, FHWA really looks at mobility and access. So the higher the road, like arterial or collector or expressway, they have higher mobility. As you start going down and getting toward local streets, the mobility, the amount of throughput, the amount of capacity essentially that you can have lessens, but you have a lot more driveways. So that's the functional classification. It's what the purpose of that road is to serve. So this is taking a map developed from ODOT's functional classification. This information is available on ODOT TIM's website, but we just presented it on this map. And the approach, again, it's sort of just considering the surrounding land use, whereas before it didn't matter. It was just basically the amount of throughput we wanted to have or access we wanted to provide. So this approach, can't take credit for it. Didn't think of it on my own. I wish I did. I would probably be a lot richer. But it actually came out of ITE in 2010. This is a designing walkable urban thoroughfares. That's the bulk of our guidance to develop the thoroughfare plan. So it's a little more of a progressive approach. It's 2010, so it's not too old. But we also looked at using that guide, as well as NACTO has an urban street design guide. ODOT has a multimodal design guide. There's other design guides out there, but those are the main ones that we pulled from. And we're falling in line with a lot of DOTs and even local municipalities that have this similar approach. So, I mentioned arterials, collectors, local roads. Those are our more functional classification terms. These are what are the new contextual classifications. So it's a boulevard, parkway, avenue, main street, neighborhood collector, or street. So each one of those has certain feels to them. It's low speed. You can compare different access to land uses where walking and biking is prioritized over vehicle transit. So it's a bit of a different approach. And the context, the land use from future land use plan from the comprehensive plan actually was used to develop the surrounding context. So we took that information, even though it had, I don't know, say 15, 20 different zoning or land use areas, we grouped them into 3 categories: residential, mixed use, and industrial. So generally speaking, those are the 3 types of contextual arrangements within the city. So taking all that information and meshing it together with the functional classifications, This is the new contextual classifications for the roadways. So the thicker the line means higher up the food chain it is for the functional classification. And the different colors, green being mixed use, orange being industrial, and blue being residential, those are the 3 categories. So you could get to see sort of the way the zones are laid out within the city. And just like I mentioned before, like Kemper is green on one end and blue on the other. Or even 747 is a lot different. So it helps distinguish between the different land uses and tries to mesh together the functional classification. So this is a chart that I think does a pretty good job of overlaying the 2 different categories for classification groups. So you have some roads, like a minor arterial, obviously can't be considered an expressway, but it can fall under contextually a boulevard, parkway, an avenue, or a main street. Where the principal arterial could either be a boulevard, parkway, or a main street. It cannot be an avenue. And we'll go into that, why that is in a minute. So just in a quick comparison, this table is intended to outline like basically FHWA functional classification. It only looks on 2 things, access and mobility, and it only looks at cars. Functional classification looks at multimodal, it looks at the built environment around it, the context, and it's more of a progressive shift to accommodate all the users within the public right-of-way. So that's how we laid out the contextual classifications. From that information, we developed design guidelines that are more appropriate for the context it's within. So again, it's to reflect the built environment surrounding it. We looked at the land use, and that's the context. The street side and travelway, those are the zones that we grouped our design guidelines into. So again, land use being basically everything from the right-of-way back, the context. Residential, mixed use, or industrial. That's the generalized categories. And this image helps sort of, as a urban residential rural area, sort of helps visualize what that would mean, where that line would fall. Then we get into the street side. So this is basically between the back of curb and the right-of-way line or building front in the urban area. So within that area, you have a frontage zone, like in a downtown setting where you have like doors would swing open, you have a canopy that may overhang, you may have outdoor dining, seating, or you know, shopping or retail racks or whatever, but that's sort of a no-man zone, so to speak. The pedestrian way, that's where you want the full accessibility, you want it to be ADA accessible, that's your throughput for your pedestrians. Then your furnishing zone is that little what we call verge or planting strip in between the back of curb and your pedestrian way. And you have street trees, you have utility poles, you have fire hydrants, trash receptacles, things of that. So this defines or shows where the frontage zone would be on each type of context. So in an urban environment, it's right there at the door fronts where the doors would swing open. In a residential area, it's the front yards. And in rural, it's non-existent. The pedestrian way, ODOT does have guidelines on the minimum width. It's 5 foot. It actually goes down to 4 foot in a constrained condition, but the preference is 6 foot. But even with that, that's sort of the minimum, and that's what we wanted to go away from, is just having a hard minimum line like where our current thoroughfare plan does. It gives a range of acceptable widths, and it considers the surrounding land use. And that's all laid out in ODOT's multimodal design guide. So you can see that in these images. The furnishing zone, again, just it's where you put everything else that needs to be in the right of way. And that's going to be in that little grass strip, or a lot of times in the downtown area, it's pavers or something else. And on a rural section, it's pretty much your ditch or your shoulder. Then between the curbs is the travel way. That's where the vehicles will be, or parking. You can also have on-street bicycle facilities. And all those, these other zones within that travel way, they're not always going to be there. They're not always going to have on-street parking. They're not always going to have bicycles, but they'll always have a pedestrian zone. So those, again, are just between the curb or between the shoulders. So that's the entire right-of-way laid out there in these images. So once we defined those areas, we started taking a deeper dive into developing the design guidelines. And we did not want to be so prescriptive as we had in the past. We wanted to provide a menu of options. So a lot of times we give ranges. We don't want to paint ourselves in a corner as a designer or even a plan reviewer. We wanted to give options and for creativity and different ways to address certain issues. So to help supplement the design guidelines, we developed a list of cross sections. And it's really not to be prescriptive, just to help visualize the intent of what some of these guidelines would look like. So there's a lot of information here. There's 3 different tables for the 3 different uses, so I won't bore you with all the details, but this is the design guidelines, or the street mix cross sections that help define the zones that correspond to those tables. And there's just several options throughout the manual that help give an idea of what could be accessible or acceptable type of roadway facilities within the city, given the context. So the process would be to, as far as overall design, either a city project or developer-driven project, would be to first document the functional classification, look at the contextual classification, and with the surrounding street context. You always want to gather feedback, and that may just be through planning commission or public meetings or whatever it may be. And you review other plans like the land use plan, the connectivity plan. Then you refer to the tables and charts and example cross sections to help provide the guidelines. How we're going to get there, there's several ways we've been very successful in converting the city into a multimodal area, but one of the things we would need to do is develop a complete streets policy. So it's not a commitment that every road or every project has to have bike or ped facilities, but it's a commitment to consider it. So it's not financially bound. A lot of communities, a lot of regulatory agencies, OKI, ODOT, they have one. They can be as simple as a 1-pager, or I've seen them 30 pages. It's not that difficult, but we also have a Vision Zero policy, and the city has a grant right now, the Safe Streets for All, that project is kicking off, and that's to develop a safety action plan. So the city's making strides to address the Vision Zero goal. Then recommended strategies that are outlined in the document, besides just the roadway design guide, or traffic calming measures, access control, parking management. That's been a hot topic here of late. So we wanted to make sure that was in there, and how right-of-way dedications are provided. Funding strategies, this is a list of a lot of different funding programs that are out there. The city's been successful with federal funds, SKIP, which is OPWC funds, and obviously SORTA's the newest one that we've had a lot of luck with. And that's all I had. Hopefully I didn't bore you all too much.
I think we're doing fine. There's a lot of information there. Thank you. I think there are some questions for this, so get ready. Mr. Jacobs, I think you were first on the line.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is a lot to take in, and I love the aspiration of it. And I think in general, you're always going to hear me being a fan of sidewalks. What I wanted to ask about, some of those aspirational plans for Kemper include sidewalks that are either 6 or even 8 feet in width. Could you kind of give me the gist of what do I get out of an 8-foot sidewalk that I don't get from a 5-foot sidewalk? And the reason I ask is that it's a lot to ask our residents to give up. And I don't think I've ever seen an 8-foot sidewalk anywhere in the city. And if we go forward, then we'd be asking residents, for example, on Kemper, for a very wide sidewalk. And what's the payoff between 5 and 8?
Sure, and again, these are just guidelines that have ranges, so it's not that we're requiring any specific amount. But the minimum sidewalk is 5 foot in constrained conditions. So, for example, like to get around a utility pole or something, we can go down to 4 foot for up to 200 feet. Then we have to provide a 5x5 landing area, and that's per ProWay guidance. But the wider sidewalks, you really have to consider where they're at. So if you have a high, I guess, a retail or a commercial area where you expect a lot of pedestrian traffic, it allows more capacity, just like a wider road allows more vehicles. It does give you, and ODOT's multimodal design guide actually gives you level of service for sidewalk pedestrian level of service. There's certain parameters for that. Then it will tell you exactly how much width is recommended based on that. But a lot of that has to deal with, we'll have to do like pedestrian counts or the development that may be coming in, it being a large traffic or pedestrian generator. They may justify, or we as a city may want wider sidewalks along their frontage. Now, getting to that, we may not be able to go back and acquire additional right-of-way unless, as we've done in the past, sort of get it as new developments or redevelopments occur. So there's a lot to it, and the answer is somewhat muddy just because we have to see what the need is, where the location.
Okay, thank you. One of the reasons I ask is currently on Kemper in one of our new developments, there's a sidewalk that's only a few years old. It's not 5 feet. And so when I just look ahead to this, if we're able to move forward on something like this, residents with an existing sidewalk would have less than 5 feet. And then we may be asking residents further down Kemper in a totally residential area for more than 5 feet. And so that was the reason for my question. I do understand it for commercial, but mainly it's sticking in my head that would be a lot to ask residents. So I appreciate your clarification.
Yeah, so a lot of like if say the city was to do a project on an existing in an existing neighborhood and it was to replace sidewalks, generally, we sort of replace in kind. But with this document, we would actually look to increase it to 5 foot if the right-of-way is allowed. There'll be, give and take. Again, it's not something that we would have to do, but that was something that would actually recommend consideration. Then it's up to the city if they want to go that route.
Thank you.
Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. It looks good, but kind of piggybacking on Mr. Jacobs, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up from one of my dear residents over there. In Heritage Hill, we have a 4 foot at very best. Now, how are we going to monitor and keeping that clear? Because there are places on Crescentville Road that you have less than 2 feet to navigate. I've been up on Ray Norsh, and there's bushes. Actually, there's some in Heritage Hill too that are encroaching on So what are we going to do? I mean, it's great to put that, but if we aren't able to keep it clear, then we really haven't done anything.
Right, right. So we would look to address any substandard existing facilities if there is a street project or if there's a new development. The maintenance of that, I guess, I'm not sure who, in this city's case, does the property owner maintain the sidewalk or does the city? I know
The
it's
city
different.
maintains the sidewalk.
The city
In terms of clearing it, Public Works and the city has notified residents in cases where they need to maintain some of their shrubbery. They've gone out and notified residents they need to cut them back, or sometimes we do it for them in some limited cases. But the city maintains the sidewalks currently.
Well,
But in terms of the actual concrete.
yeah, the concrete may be, but I can take you over Crescentville Road right now, or some neighborhood, or other streets in Heritage Hill, and there's probably as much grass as there is sidewalk.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I can't even at times walk the dog side by side, let alone my wife and I and the dog.
Yeah.
And that's been an ongoing issue, I know, for a while. So, I mean, if we're going to start moving in this direction, which I totally welcome, but we need to figure out how we're going to maintain and monitor that situation. Otherwise,
It's just
we
paper.
don't gain anything.
Yeah, and to that point, I certainly appreciate that comment. That's about maintaining it. One of the questions I have about this thoroughfare plan is describing what should be, the state of what we want it to be, what it could be, and that needs to be integrated into our planning process, our zoning code, and any development work that we do. So you had even said that land use is from, the right-of-way back, and I think that's, some of those requirements for loan loans fall into that space. So one of the questions I have is, how do we, assuming the thoroughfare plan is approved, do we need to then now take action as council to go back and look at some of the land use to add hooks for the contextual classification that we're talking about here? Right, if we're saying contextual classification is important and these are the standards we want to use, do we need to look at the ordinances in terms of land use to make sure that it accounts for these as requests or requirements?
No, that's a great question. I mean, when we first laid this out, we realized that in the land use ordinances that it only references the thoroughfare plan. And there are certain standards within the actual land use ordinances that reference sidewalks. We're not contradicting anything that's stated there. The ordinance also references the thoroughfare plan. So, not saying that you have to update it now, but it would be good to update that. The land use chapter. Along with other chapters for that matter.
I'm just wondering if maybe out of this, council might want to start a project to work with planning to make sure that we've integrated this the best way that we can, to work with them to figure out, are there changes that we need to do in the process or not? I guess that's the question. And we can think about that outside of this. Mr. Vanover, did you have something else on this?
Yes, thank you. And one of the other points, when I was thinking about it, we mentioned bike lanes. But there's a new creature on the horizon. We're not seeing a whole lot, but I've seen it in other places. The electric bikes, the e-bikes, and those in traditional bicycle operate at two different levels and different speeds, and so and then you add pedestrians into that mix. It's a concern. It's something I think that as we roll this out, we kind of build that in.
Sure.
Because it's coming.
I believe we do try to address what the state calls micro mobility devices. The state actually has, I think it's addressed in ORC, how they go about that. Like if they can a e-bike ride on the sidewalk? Can a bicycle ride on the sidewalk? So that's all somewhat trying to be addressed statewide, but I agree we probably need to look at that a little bit more, especially as that type of like Lime or Bird or, whatever scooters, if they ever come out this way.
Well, I will add to that. I know council did adopt the state ordinance changes related to micro-mobility devices that define some of those things. That was probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point. Maybe 3 would be my guess. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Good presentation. What would you say is the biggest issue or the biggest issue with this presentation?
It's fortunate because like I said early on, for the last 5-6 years, we've already been trending this way without really having a strong guide, and it all actually stemmed from a lot of the Tri-County Mall development. A lot of things happened with that. And then of course COVID hit, and then even more of an emphasis was placed on sort of that bike ped, active transportation. So we've been shifting that way, and again, I think developers are even pushing for those type of facilities and a network, and looking to even expand it to a regional trail. So it's a whole culture shift, not just for Springdale, but just in this region to really want to have those multimodal healthy connections. So that getting over that culture, I thought was going to be the hardest shift. I don't think it will be now. I think the challenge would be is to right size the right of way, right size the roads on within the right of way, because the right of way space is limited. It's mostly built out, so it means you're not really going to try to widen the roads. What you're going to do is try to say do a road diet, or maybe if it's like Kemper is 7-8 lanes wide, does it really need to be? Now with Tri-County Mall gone, definitely not. But what happens when the new developments come in or redevelopments occur? And that's something that we've been studying. I think those bigger, larger thoroughfares that we have in the city, I think we're going to have to take a hard look and see what's our priority for defining the uses within that right of way. We'll be up against a lot of struggles with utilities. The urban tree, those have to fit some way. The trees are an asset that a community has. A lot of times when you want to put a shared use path in, that's the first thing to go. I don't know if that's the right or that should be what's prioritized, but all that has to be discussed on every project.
One more question. I don't know if you've noticed, but on Route 4 in Fairfield, they're taking the sidewalk all the way up Route 4. It kind of reminds me of a larger Kemper Road, if you will. We have issues with the way the mailboxes are placed on the street. I think a really good idea would be to make that walkable all the way through. It would take a lot of construction to move, the mailboxes and things of that nature, but the more walkable neighborhoods that you have, the better. And I think that the thing that they're doing in Fairfield is a really good idea. Kemper should be walkable. It's not, wasn't designed to be that way, but it's just an idea.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more walkable and more options you give residents, the more community can build itself. I can't tell you the number of times I've spoken with neighbors just on a walk in the neighborhood. It's a lot easier and more natural if we can do that more often. I think that starts to address some of the concerns we've had as a council before, is how do we build that sense of community? Giving options that don't involve getting in your car to drive to the corner is, I think, one of those things that we can do to make our community tighter. Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, you talk about Kemper Road. I mean, 3-4 years ago, we had a packed house, and the residents there soundly said no sidewalks. We had, it sketched out and laid out. So it's also going to take a culture change with the population, and that's, because we are diverse age-wise, that's going to have to change too. But and that's one of the things that it's going to have to play into it.
And to be clear, this thoroughfare plan doesn't require, we're not changing the zoning code as a result of this. It's just updating the references. But yeah, we'll have to be careful with every one of those changes. What I did like about the presentation Mr. Riggs gave was describing how these are the recommendations, but it should be tailored to the context. And for example, that Kemper Road context with that specific area of street that drew so much attention, that's much more of a busy thoroughfare, even though it's a residential street for a lot of our friends out there. So that's where we have to have some of those conversations. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, and your point is well taken. And as a resident of Kemper Road, as mentioned, we can go forward. I think if we put enough effort into just taking those residents' concerns at the utmost and making it the smallest possible footprint. So for example, not within my district, but on the other end of Kemper, there are residents that have accessible ramps. And some of our early plans for sidewalks would have devastated those ramps. And I didn't understand really then, move the sidewalk closer to the street, get it on the other side of those telephone poles, and then you're gonna have less pushback from residents, at least some. I know it wouldn't cancel all the problems, but just in general, I know it's micro-specific and I brought it up, but as we go forward, if we can just make it the smallest footprint possible in residential areas, I would do my best to try to bring more people on board. Thank you.
All right. Good conversation. Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think the big thing that we keep in mind, as Mr. Riggs indicated, this isn't causing something to happen different in terms of codification of what we're doing. It's just to state, hey, we need to consider these things as everything comes through. And we've been doing it for years, and even with regard to the Northland Boulevard project, we talk about redirecting traffic away from residential. That's a big part of what that is. You know, we have folks that will go up Kemper between Longview and Route 4 when it's not necessary. We got a lot of residents there, and so to pull back on that traffic, redirect them on Northland, helps our residents that are on Kemper. Less traffic may make it more likely that they're going to go and walk along that side of the road. So we're going through these processes, and I think this council, the prior council, this administration, the prior administration, folks have been acting with these types of ideas in place, but it's great to have them all put together as Mr. Riggs has, and now we really have a great guide for council and planning commission administration to use.
Mr. Vanover.
Thank you. It just triggered something else. Mr. Glees mentioned about mailboxes, and something that is becoming a very active interaction and has changed in probably about the last 5 years is home delivery. Amazon, Kroger, you name it, you know, it's a nightmare on, I think if I remember right, the United States Post Office dictates where the mailboxes are located.
Yep.
So we need, may need some play from them, but Kemper Road at times, I've been behind Amazon. I've been behind Amazon in my own neighborhood. So that's one of those new things that we're going to have to figure out how. I don't know how we lessen that impact or make it smoother, but it's something that's there now that we didn't see, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder how many bailouts we would have added to our streets if we knew that home delivery was going to be so big going forward. I do also want to call out and appreciate the comments that were made for planning around pedestrian throughput. When I hear the conversations about sidewalks on Kemper Road, we talk about redirecting traffic that shouldn't be there for residential. And when we had the big discussion about sidewalks on Kemper, the primary focus for that was on the residents who were affected by the sidewalks. I don't know that enough emphasis was given on throughput and the residents that were trying to navigate through that neighborhood in order to get to our commercial district at the time, especially the mall and the area around it. So I'm glad we're kind of taking that higher level focus and think about all the throughput and the way that people use this. I will warn you that I think one of the things you mentioned in your recommendations will be called up pretty quickly, and that's around traffic calming. That's a frequent item in addition to parking that we hear about. In the past, we've done studies about what are the right types of traffic calming devices to use in residential areas. Since we've done that study a few years back around traffic or street humps or bumps or towers or cushions, I think that the logic and some of the available options have changed too. So I suspect that we're going to hear requests for that being fleshed out a little bit more in the near term if this is approved. All right, good. Any other questions or discussion related to Resolution 8, 2025? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council on Resolution 8, 2025.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Resolution 8, 2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. And again, thank you, Mr. Riggs, and also the Planning Commission who had this before it came here and did a lot of the review. There's a lot of information inside of here. I assume this will be published on will be on the planning side or in the city engineer page? Mr. Yule?
Thank you. I don't know if we determined where it will be placed, but it will be out there.
So in the meanwhile, if anyone would like to take a look at the wider plan or the more detail, just contact city administration and we can get you a copy, but it will be posted and then publicized. There is a lot of detail there, and it's really good information. Okay, that's the end of ordinances and resolutions. Next up, we have our added agenda item, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn to executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G3 to conference with counsel related to pending litigation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion about moving to executive session? Administration, do we expect any action out of this? All right. Ms. Bott, if you poll counsel on moving to executive session.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. We are in executive session. We will return. Council has returned from executive session. Next, we'll move on to old business. We have one item of old business on our agenda this evening, and it's listed again as ordinance number 10, 2025. Council may recall that this was the ordinance that was brought forth at our February 19th council meeting, where we voted 6-1 to send it to Planning Commission for its review and recommendation. Planning Commission, I know we don't have the advantage of having either of our Planning Commission representatives here, but I'll summarize as best I can and then ask if there's any updates or corrections. But this item was sent to Planning Commission on our February 19th meeting. You would have seen in your packet a request from Planning Commission for an extended period of time to review and have their public hearing and review this item. As I understand it, what was communicated to Planning wasn't sufficient for them to think that they needed to do a public hearing and then actually vote on it. Through the discussions at the planning meeting, they found that they did need to do some more work. And out of that, Planning has then sent us a letter asking for an extension. For those that might not be aware, our charter does require that any item submitted to Planning do have its recommendation back to council within 40 days unless an extension is offered. And this is one of the first cases, I think, where they've asked for an extension. So I think it makes sense, just based on the communications back and forth that happened, that we should do that. So in order to do that, what would need to happen is we would need to have a motion to provide an extension, and we can talk about how long and what that would be. But I just wanted to set the stage for a minute on why we're talking about it tonight. I will say that based on the timeline, the normal timeline for one of these changes, ordinarily, if they had gotten back to us for this meeting, what would happen is we would schedule a public hearing if council wanted, and then take action as appropriate. There's a 15-day advertisement period that's required for public hearings. So if we agreed tonight that we still wanted to take action on this, either with the extension or without, that would happen at our 4/16 meeting, and that's when we would have the opportunity to have our public hearing and then vote one way or the other on the proposed ordinance. So let me stop there and ask if there's any questions or feedback related to the ordinance that was sent to Planning, or if administration wants to fill in a little bit more from what happened at Planning or not, since I wasn't there. Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, there was a misunderstanding on my behalf, so we didn't advertise for a public hearing for a zoning text amendment, which is how Planning Commission would receive this. So I thought it was going to be a dialogue and a discussion amongst the Planning Commission members to provide the input and feedback to allow that to come back to council to draft either an amended version of what was already drafted for that ordinance. So, but yeah, we can proceed and continue to advertise as we need to for either direction that council wants to move forward, be that back to planning or continue within this body.
And it's important to note that in that timeline, even if we extend planning's opportunity to review again, they have a standing meeting on the 8th, the second Tuesday. It would be within their normal schedule if we send it back to them with an extension tonight. If, say, we extended their response timeline to the end of business day on 4/10, that still fits within their advertising requirements for planning to have a public hearing, and then also within the timeline for us to advertise our public hearing and still take action on the 16th. We can do that if we extend the timeline or not, in either case. Just know that if we do not extend the timeline, it will again take 5 votes to pass the ordinance that was sent down because it would come through with no recommendation, which is the same as a negative. The other thing I'll say is that one of the things that came to light as part of this communication is not just this one-time thing. I think one of the things council should probably start doing going forward is adjusting our procedure a little bit for when we send these ordinances to planning. Just as planning would send a letter back to us with their finding, I think it would be in council's best interest if we're going to continue to make change recommendations like this to start doing that too, right? So after we take an action like we did in the February 19th meeting, we should send them a correspondence just to have an artifact, a document of what was requested with the thinking around it. That doesn't have to require motions or action tonight, but I think it's something we should start doing. That could happen from the clerk or it can come from my desk. Either one's fine. I think you saw the need for that in the letter from planning where they said, hey, whichever you decide, please send us a letter so we make sure we're on the same page. I think that's a fair request just to make sure communications are clear. So I am looking for just general assent tonight on whether or not you're comfortable with us doing those letters as we do action, because it's not listed in our procedures, that I think we should start doing that. I'd also think we should add it to our procedures, but that will take some time. Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I think that is the smart way. Matter of fact, I would say instead of sending an ordinance to them, send a letter that here are the discussions that council had, because then they craft something, it comes back with their recommendation. You don't have to do a supermajority vote if you override, and it allows both parties to work at optimum. I think too, if planning requests some additional time to look this, I think we should owe it to them. We've sent it to them. So I say then we owe it to them to give them the extension, allow them to work. My 2 cents.
Thanks for that. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I agree that sending letters going forward is best practice. I also have no concern giving them more time. But I was wondering if anyone who attended the meeting could give, in reading the letter, it wasn't clear to me whether they wanted more information from this body or time to do their own research. Does anybody have a sense? And unfortunately, nobody's here for that report, but does anybody have a sense of whether it's either of those or some third thing? Thank you.
I can tell you the feedback I got, at least from the representatives that were at planning after the meeting, what they shared. And also I spoke with Mr. Oakham, who's the chair of planning, ahead of the OKI meeting this past a couple weeks ago. I think the biggest barrier they had was the misunderstanding, the miscommunication on the public hearing that would be required. Because even in the meeting, if they had realized the mistake of the ordinance being sent down, because the public hearing wasn't advertised in advance, there was no way for them to take action even if they wanted to. I will share that what I did hear from our members from planning that represent us there is there was a wider discussion about what else should change or might need to change if we were to make this ordinance go forward. And that's the normal process from planning, right? So what we ask of them to do is think about the ordinances that we send down and what it could mean to the other parts of the code that we might not be thinking about. In this specific case, it's changing one number from a 2 to a 3. So I think the expectations that we had was that it's probably a little bit of a lighter review, so it was a little frustrating for some people that it needed to be extended. But in light of the miscommunication, it makes a lot of sense. And I certainly welcome their feedback on what else we should look at. It goes back to some of those same topics and same discussions, right? Is how do we maximize the zoning code and our ordinances around it? I think there'll be an opportunity over the next several months and years for council to figure out the best way to work with planning. We've seen some differences on how the process has worked in the past versus how we are using it now, and we probably should formalize some of that. So outside of this extension, I think what I'm asking is that City Council think about if it makes sense for City Council to update its rules of procedure, just like we did in Rule 30 at the beginning of the year for how agendas and how our meetings are managed, to just codify how we send things to planning. So we don't have to have this discussion every time. So we don't have to say, are we sending an ordinance? Are we doing a joint discussion or not? All of those can be decided ahead of time outside of the time pressures of a specific ordinance. So I bring that up just so you can be thinking about it. I think at the next meeting, we should talk about whether we want rules and law to add rules for how council should send zoning code changes to planning, or if we just want to leave the process as it is. So I want to plant that seed so we can talk about it next time, is think about what is the right way for us to work with planning based on the charter that says that zoning changes initiate from council. Zoning changes can also initiate from planning. So we need to make sure that we're on the same page. I will tell you that in speaking with Mr. Oakham, he was very open to those discussions, and he's also wants that conversation because he wants to have this work just as much as anyone else. It helps all the residents if we work hand in glove. So I also support an extension so that planning can give us their feedback like they should. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. This question is for Law Director Braun. Regardless of what happens with this ordinance, if it stays the same or if it does change, it's already been stated that it needs to be taken out of the zoning code. So would that be two separate issues? Should that be applied to the ordinance or should it be applied separately?
Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those are two separate issues. You've sent down to them looking at adjusting the number. If we were to remove it from the zoning code, that in and of itself would be a text amendment, which we would need to send to them and have them consider whether this should or should not be in the zoning code. So that is a separate question, and it's something that would need to be sent to them separately, because if we were going to remove it from the zoning code now, we wouldn't be amending the zoning code. We would be erasing it from the zoning code, then passing a standalone ordinance, which is something that I think Mr. Jacobs may recall that Urban Farming Committee looked at. So it's a process that's separate.
And to that point, that's one of the reasons that I was talking about the letter and being clear as to what we're asking. Because absent some of those guardrails, it makes sense for someone in planning to say, well, let's look at more things that are connected, not just this one change, right? So the ordinance that you brought forward was just change the number from 2 to 3. And the expectation was you sent that to, we as a council sent that to planning and said, we want to change this one number from 2 to 3, give us your feedback. I welcome the feedback on, hey, really this should go into all the other areas if we're going to do this, but changing one thing shouldn't have to require changing everything unless the everything is so broken that we can't fix it. So one of the things I want to make sure when we communicate with planning is what we're asking them to do. Right, so we send an ordinance with one change. We welcome feedback for different ways to look at it, but we still want an up and down vote on this change. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just along the lines of what Mr. Gleaves had referenced in terms of whether this is something that comes out of the planning, out of the zoning code, and it was referenced with urban farming with regard to whether the chickens issue should come out of the zoning code. It's important to note, if council goes through those considerations, that the big thing that you're going to be looking at is how we're going to go and enforce those things. And so on the one end, if it's in the zoning code, then that's going to be our building department enforcing those things. If it's out of that, then it's going to be our police department enforcing those things. And so some of the things that should be considered is that what we should have law enforcement doing or not? And so they have a lot of things that they go through and have to go through and manage. And that's something else to be considered. if council goes down that road.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins, and that goes to that earlier question that I was saying we should talk about next time is, do we want to set up a committee to look at that, right? If we're going to talk about taking entire sections out, that's something that we need to make sure we look at a little bit more than just send an ordinance down back and forth. That's probably a group that involves planning as well as council and building department administration, and we can set those up. But I don't want to cloud tonight's issue with that wider. I just wanted to make sure everyone understood there's more to it than this. What we're talking about for this is realize that this is an example that we can use to make the process smoother going forward, but we still have the immediate action I want to make sure we do. So we've talked a little bit about an extension to give planning another chance to do the public hearing. Are there any more questions or feedback about that specifically? I feel like there's general sense. So at this point, the chair is open to a motion to extend the review period for Planning Commission's review of ordinance number 10/2025 that was sent down on 2/19 to extend their deadline to 4/10 at close of business. Is there a motion for that?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Questions or discussion about the motion to extend planning's deadline to deliver its recommendation back? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you would poll council on the request to extend.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mrs. Webster?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. The motion to extend the deadline to the Planning Commission's recommendation related to ordinance number 10/2025 passes with 5 affirmative votes. In that motion, we are extending the deadline to the end of business on 4/10/2025, which would be 2 days after their currently scheduled meeting and should allow them time to have their public hearing. Related to that, knowing that they will have a deadline on 4/10, I'm looking for general assent to schedule in advance of getting their recommendations, City Council's public hearing for 4/16. Are there any concerns about scheduling our public hearing for 4/16 so we can act on the recommendations? Mr. Vanover?
Well, you can always schedule it, and if we need to cancel it and change it, it's better to do that than to be caught in the quandary.
Yeah. That's my recommendation too. And the other reason 4/10 is a good date for that extension is that's Thursday before the Friday before our 4/16 meeting. Meaning council will have received the recommendation back from planning in advance of when our deadline is to have ordinances or agenda items for our 4/16 meeting. So if something unexpected happens or comes out of that recommendation, we will certainly have an opportunity to adjust or take action as appropriate. That also keeps this project on the same timeline it would have been on if there wasn't the miscommunication. So it's just a learning experience in that case. Okay, good. So we'll go ahead and plan that public hearing both for, planning can plan their own, but then we will do it for 4/16 for City Council. The other item out of that was the letter and communication to planning. In anticipation of that being passed, I drafted just a draft letter to give you an idea of what that would be, and I'm passing that out the dais that just communicates what we talked about, right? This was the ordinance that was passed, this was the date it happened, and what we're asking back for. So since planning asked us for a letter back, this is the letter I'm proposing to send back to them. Obviously, we can make any changes. In this case, I'm signing it for myself because I was writing it and I didn't know where we'd end up. If council thinks it's more appropriate for this letter to come from the clerk, I'm happy to make that change. We can certainly do that going forward when it's more of a clean transfer. I feel like this one just had some special handling that was needed, so that's why I add a little bit more context. So I don't need a vote on the letter, but if you do have concerns or questions about it, I'm going to get with administration tomorrow to finish this and make sure that they don't have any changes, and then we can go ahead and send it. So if you read it and have any questions or concerns, just know that I'll need those back tonight or tomorrow morning. All right? Good. Anything else on ordinance number 10/2025? It's a lot of conversation for a small change, but I think we're learning a lot in the process, and hopefully we can move faster going forward. Okay, next up, new business. Is there any new business that anyone on council or would like to bring forward, or administration? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to meetings and announcements. Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick announcement. SwimSafe will be hosting an open interview session on March the 25th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at our community center for various positions at the pool for the summer.
Thank you. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next BZA meeting is scheduled for the 25th of this month at 7 p.m. in these chambers.
All right, not seeing any more meetings and announcements. Next, we'll move on to communications from the audience. This is the second opportunity for anyone in the audience that would like to address council for any reason. Simply come forward to the podium, state your name and address, and you can address council for up to 5 minutes. The floor is now open for communications from the audience. Second call. Third and final call. All right, I'm closing communications from the audience. Next, we'll move to Mr. Jacobs for a recap of legislative items and legislation developed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, as you review your legislative summary, item 1 was addressed by Ordinance 11-2025, which received a second reading. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Verdantis for preliminary design engineering for the Northland Boulevard and Kemper Road intersection modifications and shared use path project. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 2 received a second reading and was addressed by Ordinance 12-2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Marquee Engineering for design engineering for the community center HVAC replacement project phase 2. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 3 also received a second reading. It was addressed by Ordinance 14-2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with TEC Engineering Incorporated for the provision of professional services for the operations and maintenance of the City of Springdale's traffic control system. That passed with 5 affirmative votes as well. Item 4 received a second reading and was addressed by Ordinance 13-2025, an ordinance accepting a proposal under the Ohio Department of Transportation Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Pavement Technology Incorporated for the 2025 annual street program Pavement Rejuvenator project. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 5 is in development. It received a first reading. It was addressed by Ordinance 15-2025. An ordinance accepting a proposal under the Ohio Department of Transportation's Cooperative Purchasing Program and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with Strausser Construction Incorporated for the 2025 annual street program Crack Seal and Cape Seal project, again receiving a first reading, and that will come back before council on the April 2nd meeting. Item 6 received a first reading. It was addressed by Ordinance 16-2025, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into a mutual aid agreement for law enforcement between the city of Springdale, the city of Forest Park, and the city of Fairfield. And that will be before us again at our next meeting on April the 2nd. Item 7, a resolution adopting a thoroughfare plan for the city of Springdale, was addressed by Resolution 8-2025, receiving 5 affirmative votes. Item 8, still in development, received a first reading, an ordinance declaring certain, this will be a first reading on April 2nd, an ordinance declaring certain city property as surplus property and authorizing the sale, disposal, or transfer of surplus property. And finally, also there was a 5-0 vote to extend the deadline for Planning Commission to, I believe, April 10th, 2025, to consider Ordinance 10-2025.
That's correct.
And unless there's anything else from administration?
Administration, you good? Council, you good? All right, all that's left before us is item 16. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.